So today's episode, we're going to talk about something we call the AI treadmill. And it's this whole idea that there are many people flooding the zone right now, selling hope by preying upon people's insecurities or fear about where their jobs are headed, particularly as it relates to the use of AI.
So we're also going to be talking about work and what people are feeling at work using AI as a tool. But then is it going to be leading to increased stress, increased burnout?
The reason we call this the treadmill is because people are continuing to emphasize that the only way or the best way to compete in the future and stay relevant, particularly if in the knowledge economy, is to get on what I'm calling the AI treadmill. And that's a treadmill that is being sold to people as something that it starts at a really high speed, but eventually you can get off of it, or you can kind of stay on it comfortably at a lower speed. And my thesis, and Erica and I are going to dive into this right now, is that once you get on that treadmill at a very high speed, you're now basically locked into that speed for an extended period of time without the ability to get off because you're being conditioned to live in a new type of reality.
Well, as someone who hates the actual treadmill, I don't know how I feel about the AI treadmill. But it is true, we are being conditioned more and more to use these tools. And it depends what speed we're at. And the biggest question that you just posed, right, is how comfortable are we getting off of that treadmill? And there's so much noise out there. We have that viral article that just was circulated by pretty much every single person on LinkedIn and Twitter, right? Something big is coming. And it's leading to a lot of confusion because then, and let's dig into that article for a little bit, you juxtapose that against another article that just came out in the Harvard Business Review, which is saying that there's a very kind of paradoxical component to AI. And this is one of the things that even for me personally, I wish I could go and rewind a little bit, but it was the narrative that we were seeing then, and this was even just a handful of months ago, we're not going back years, which was the fact that AI as a tool, I always framed it as it's like the Robin to our Batman, and it was about, you know, AI support and human ingenuity, and you were going to be this dynamic duo together. And the paradox that's emerging now is it a partner? Is it actually reducing your workload? I kind of feel like people were sold a bill of goods in some ways, right? We were told, yes, it's going to drive efficiency. It's going to drive productivity. Yes, the promise of AI was that it could do away with the mundane, the rote, the boring, and, you know, all of the work that were we even meant to be doing in the first place. And again, you could argue that no, humans were meant to be doing the higher order level thinking. And we said, right, we'd be migrating up to the next higher order value proposition and doing the work that is uniquely human. And that is still true. But part of this AI treadmill that you are laying out is the fact that we actually see, and this is what the Harvard Business Review study said, it is not leading to greater productivity. Because it is actually not leading to less work, it is creating more work. So it took the treadmill at like 3.5 and automatically ramped it up to 6. So we went from, you know, comfortably walking with it to now, at least for me, 6 would be a sprint. So maybe the better analogy is like going to 7.5. And we see a lot of people crumbling under the weight of this because they're like, wait, the promise of this was that it was supposed to free me from a lot of this bullshit that I didn't want to do. But now I'm actually going back and I have to oversee it. I have to apply judgment to it. I have to fact check it. So there aren't a lot of efficiencies that are being created.
There are so many ways to look at this. As I think about this, the reason why I use the treadmill analogy, and this is, I think, in a lot of our themes, we're trying to use a kind of simplistic analogy to get around very complicated issues. So the promise of AI, at least in theory, long term, is that the implementation of AI in our own lives and in the workplace is going to be an efficiency tool that saves us time and effort, right? That's the promise of it. That's what we're being sold. Now, we're in, and we've said this so many times, people are going to get sick of it, but I don't care. We are in inning 1 of a 9-inning ball game when it comes to the development of AI. So there's an argument to be made that as AI gets better, as it continues to refine itself, and as people learn to use it a little bit more efficiently, that some of these hiccups we're talking about now are going to start to subside. That over time, people are going to use this better. It's like any other tool. They're going to figure it out, and it's going to become more efficient for them. But that's only one possible pathway here. And I think there are other contingencies, and that's what I'm kind of curious about. I was very interested to see, even a couple months ago, you and I probably get different things marketed to us in our feeds on social media.
Oh yes, my entire algorithm is like, you are a female in your mid-40s, you need to eat more protein, you need to take creatine, and you need to strength train. Any woman watching out there knows exactly what I'm talking about. Macros, all of it. I digress.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what you're talking. That's like another language to me. I don't even know what you're babbling about.
Oh, the
there.
algorithm knows.
Now, I get a lot of stuff that is geared towards me, 80s hair bands and action stars from the movies that I grew up with and all that stuff. But on a more contemporary level, so I'm going to call them the usual suspects. There are a handful of people out there. I'm not going to name them here. I'm not going to denigrate them personally. Some of the people watching this love these people. But I'm going to call them gurus or, the usual suspects of people who are the best opportunists. Mm-hmm. And they see a space where they can create a sandbox and make money, and they immediately go into that space and they try to carve out territory. And they do it quickly, they do it shrewdly, they do it opportunistically. And I think what they're doing when it comes to AI, like they do in other realms, is they are selling hope to people for money, capitalizing on what they are trying to exploit, which is fear. And there is a lot of fear, trepidation, and anxiety around artificial intelligence. We know this. A lot of people are calling it AI overwhelm. That's the term being used, and I think it's pretty accurate. I have these usual suspects, these gurus, selling people on the idea that you have an opportunity right now, if you take it, to accelerate to where you need to be so you can be part of the future, because if you don't take it right now, if you blow this opportunity, the future is going to leave you behind. And I hate that message. That is the essence of this AI treadmill episode. I hate that message because even if there is a morsel of truth in that for some people, the idea that if you don't accelerate right now to do all of these things they're prescribing to you and learn how to use 30 different tools, they call it micro learning. Spend 10 to 15 minutes a day learning a different AI tool for a month. I see all these platforms marketing this. Interesting idea. But here's the thing. The promise of AI was that it was going to save us time. It was effectively going to intuit what we needed to have done. It was going to do it for us. Now you're being told you have to learn dozens of tools, figure out how to utilize those tools, each in the instances that they're relevant. And oh, by the way, those tools are evolving on a daily basis, meaning that you're going to have to constantly refresh how you use those tools. So you're spending a chunk of your day. Let's say your day is 8 hours of work. You're spending 4 hours of your day just trying to figure out which tool to use, how to implement it, and learning how to use it. Now you get to a point on the learning curve where all of a sudden everything magically starts falling into place. That's the real promise of AI. I'll love it when we get there, and maybe we will get there. But right now, you're actually talking about putting people on a treadmill and putting the speed up to 12 and keeping them running at that speed for the indeterminate future and telling them if they don't do that, the future is going to leave them behind and they're effectively going to be useless.
But this is a lot of fear mongering. This again is why we have to separate out hype from reality.
Exactly.
The deep reality is that most people are not even using AI. And this is what we tend to forget, right? This is why, there are all of these different bubbles of conversations. There's the corporate conversation. There is the individual conversation. There's a leadership conversation. There's the workload, all of these things. And it makes you feel like you're on this treadmill. But then that's the chasm. That's the tug of war in this.
Yeah.
Is that then again, you pit that against the vast majority of people, everyday people out there who are like, all right, I might have dabbled in ChatGPT, but I don't use it monthly.
Check out our tug of war episode.
So again, in one ear, you hear all of this. Again, it's based in a lot of fear. It's making you feel like if you don't adopt the newest that's being directly marketed to you, that you're already losing the game. You're already completely behind the 8 ball. But then you strip away those layers and you look at, again, the vast majority of people, whether they are in corporate America in the knowledge economy, if they are in other fields, the trades, whatever it is, most people still are not even using AI. So that's this chasm that is growing. And again, that's why we see so much of this anxiety. It's why we see skyrocketing levels of employee burnout. Stress is at an all-time high. The promise, it's like the promise versus the peril.
Yeah.
And the promise of AI, and it was paying a lot of lip service to the fact that it was going to create efficiencies. It has in some way, but I do want to go back to that piece about cognitive load, because our brains, so a lot of this is neurological. We are not built to then defer some thinking to AI, check AI, then wonder, where else can I be efficient? Where else can I be productive? There are multiple layers to this conversation, because when you are on the AI treadmill in old, still industrial holdovers, which is that tug of war, right? They're old systems that are then like, okay, humans are still nodes in a much bigger ecosystem, the organization, right? How do we squeeze out as much from them as we possibly can? And how do we keep, incrementally increasing that treadmill speed? People are having massive WTF moments where they are dreading every Sunday night going back to work on Monday, because they're like, the promise of this is not being realized. And at the same time, they read the Matt Schumer piece where they're like, sorry, fuck, I am going to be out of work.
The crux of that piece, and again, for any of you who have not
YouTube
seen
will probably
that piece,
censor me.
who have not, that's okay. For any of you who have not seen that piece, it was posted on X. It's by a guy named Matt Schumer. You just look it up. It was a compelling piece. And the bottom line there is that his premise was that as an industry insider, as a developer, as someone who's involved in AI, he's seeing from the inside the fact that their world has already been seismically altered. And the premise is that going forward in the next few years, it's already starting to happen. It's here. This is not something that's theoretical. That a lot of the things that we take for granted as jobs or as capabilities in the knowledge economy are effectively going to be out disintermediated. Like they're not going to be, people aren't going to be needed anymore because the technology is evolving. It is training itself and it is evolving so quickly. The models are getting so advanced that a lot of things in every industry you can imagine in the knowledge sector, whether it's financial, accounting, legal, insurance, it doesn't matter. You go down, consulting, obviously, down the list, that people are going, there's going to be like a bomb that hits. I think he equated it, I read this a couple weeks ago, but he was equating it to something that was going to be far worse of a seismic shock to our collective system than what happened during the COVID situation. So this is something that's going to have a metabolic effect, according to this. Now, I think it's compelling. I think it's well articulated. I think it's very sensible. If you were to ask me on a scale of 0 to 100 how much stock I put in it personally, I'm certainly not at 0. I think there's a lot of credibility there. I also am not at 100, and I'll tell you why. I think I just don't tend to lean to the most extreme cases here, not because they're not possible. There's a chance that the wildest scenarios about AI, good, bad, and otherwise, could materialize. But I think there's a likelier midpoint. So I'm somewhere at like 50 to 60 on a 0 to 100 scale in terms of my buy-in to this. But there's another fundamental question here when you look at an article like that, which got so many people talking, which is that who benefits from promoting these technologies and what is the perspective of people as they analyze them? The why and who. These are such basic questions. We have to start training ourselves. And one of the things Erica and I are just getting started doing for all of you is we're brainstorming in real time. Like this is not all laid out. We're kind of reinventing ourselves. Is figuring out what kind of tools, what kind of basic tools can be helpful to all of you as you navigate all these topics we're talking about. And one of the most basic is just retraining yourselves to ask the right and the most fundamental questions as you evaluate these topics. So we don't over-intellectualize them, we don't overcomplicate them. Who is saying what and why? When you think about those people who are the power brokers in the AI industry, their metrics for success right now are trying to drive investment capital, more money into the industry. They're trying to drum up excitement. They are trying to build the most bullish cases and say, feed the beast, feed the beast. We need to keep building this. We need to keep building the models. So this guy who wrote this article, and again, he might have had pure intentions. He might fully believe what he's saying, and it could be very credible. But he's an AI industry insider who is both an entrepreneur and an investor in the space. When you peel back the layers of the onion, and you're like, person X has an interest in the promotion of this space. Person Y has an interest in trying to bring the space down. You start to understand, okay, now it's no different than when you evaluate a news source. Is the news source liberal, conservative? Does it have an interest in promoting a certain way of thinking? Once you understand that, then you're like, okay, I need to take this with a grain of salt, or at least look at it more critically. So this article is really interesting, but I do think that there is a lot of money. This is a massive ecosystem. There are trillions of dollars collectively being poured into the development of AI, the energy and water resources that are going to be used, the development of data centers. So at the bottom line here, for me, is understanding the who and the why of who's saying what, asking the right questions, and then we can kind of unwrap the conversation from there. And then there becomes the human component to this, which is what ultimately is going to be the impact on all of us because of all of this rhetoric.
Yes, so that is exactly what that piece missed. It was almost as if it was an assumption that as AI grows in intelligence and sophistication and as the models evolve, it was kind of supplanting and or cut and pasting AI into vast swaths of the knowledge economy.
Yeah.
It's like AI is getting better at XYZ, ABC. It is coming for your job almost in its entirety. Good luck. And it was missing another very critical piece of this, which, again, as two people who are team human and say this is how humanity is going to have to evolve and co-evolve alongside these tools. It's why I keep revisiting the widely quoted statement, and I poked holes in it in my book, AI and the New Human Frontier, but I'd like to revisit it and poke some holes in it again. And that is the whole kind of adage of AI will not replace you, someone using AI will. And it goes back to what I said at the very beginning, which is kind of the human AI dynamic duo. As I've long framed it, human is the Batman, AI is the Robin. And I think we're starting to see many holes poked into that narrative. And it's a narrative that everybody espouses. It's a big talking point on stage. It's a big talking point on LinkedIn. And I think what we're starting to see is if someone using AI can replace you, that's the AI treadmill. We forget the fact that maybe the person that will replace you will be the one who has tapped even deeper into their unique human qualities, is someone who doesn't suffer from cognitive load and mental fatigue and actually has their own sense of mental sovereignty and can say, yeah, all right, I can rely on this as a tool, but you know what? I know when enough is enough. And this is gobbling up my time. I'm starting to fall into the vortex. I can't sustain a pace of 7 or 8 on the treadmill. You know what? I need to infuse this with my own thinking. Because I've always said that mental sovereignty, right, which is our own kind of sense of cognitive agency, is going to be one of the things that's going to get us to slow down this treadmill and to say, you know what, I might have a suite of products I like, but I still need to rely on me and my thinking to do the other 80%. And if we can't get from A to B, then we're going to keep pressing the speed higher and higher on this treadmill until we fall off. And that's the burnout, I think, that we see.
Basically being conditioned. And we're being conditioned to repeat or accelerate these behaviors. Now, here again, the caveat here is that we might have a very different conversation in just like 2 years' time. We could fast forward, and in 2 years, these tools might evolve to the point where we're like, oh, okay, now the promise is actually being realized. Maybe we just have to get over that hump as they develop. But I also think about this, that line is spewed constantly now, ad nauseum. You are not going to lose your job to AI. You can lose your job to someone who learns how to use AI better than you. That is a great way to take fear, reposition it as hope. And what it's doing is it's basically saying, again, who's pushing that message out? People who run semiconductor companies and who run AI companies, because ultimately they're benefiting from telling you, you have to buy these products, you have to engage with them. And oh, by the way, what's the end goal here? The end goal here, right now, these are being tested on, and the acceptance is being built among individual people, among me, you, all of you out there who, when you go home, whether you work in a big office or you have your own business, you're thinking about these things as an individual person. It's all being pushed to you right now and telling you, you have to upskill, you have to do this, you have to do that. And then Shangri-La will unfurl in a few years' time where you'll be like, now I can function at a higher level. The problem is that the end goal for these companies that are building AI right now is to sell them into enterprises, to sell them into businesses. We are kind of the Trojan horse right now in many ways. Here's the deal. Let's talk about basic economics here. First of all, there was an article that I saw the other day. I've seen several actually about this, where all of a sudden AI companies are partnering up with the largest consulting firms out there about how to create messaging and create effective sell-throughs so that the biggest companies out there will integrate enterprise-wide AI solutions, basically as a way to pay a lot of money for these kind of semi-proprietary solutions that are sold into these companies so that these companies can make more money and become more productive and more efficient. And that doesn't necessarily mean for the benefit of human labor. It could be at the expense of human labor. Labor and productivity, often, if they're in sync, great. But often they are two different things. What happens in an economy when productivity goes like this, but the need for human labor goes like this? What ends up happening is you have a small concentrated amount of people, the owners of the technology, the owners of the businesses, who are making increasing amounts of money. In fact, the money starts to increase exponentially because the productivity is self-replicating. The AI is building upon itself and making itself better. So the efficiencies are self-replicating, but more and more people won't be needed. So if productivity goes like this and the need for labor goes like this, you're going to end up in a very, very difficult situation. And the brightest economists out there, and we're not economists, are struggling to realistically give an assessment of what that could look like in a few years if this Matt Schumer bomb hits.
This is at the heart of the tug of war, the AI tug of war, because you're talking about one end of the spectrum. These are all outdated metrics, right? This is my big soapbox right now.
Yeah.
That enough of productivity, enough of efficiency, enough about input and output. Like, we are evolving so quickly beyond these things and we keep defaulting to them. So until we get all of the mindset shifts that are needed, right? I go back to all of our neurological wiring. It has to start there first. We're still just defaulting to all of this old thinking. It's why, again, that other study that came out, I think it was in HBR, that said too that 96% of enterprise AI pilots or programs fail. Fail because there's no long-term thinking around it, right? It's just dropped in as a potential solution without thinking of the people piece. And that's what I always come back to, is how is it affecting us? That tug of war then on the other end of the spectrum is the fact that we're having all of these conversations about AI coming in, right? That side is pulling very hard. We have an ability, right, to completely reinvent work, completely rethink human labor, get people actually excited to however they show up on a Monday morning to go to work. But we are not leading with human talent and kind of people capital first. We're so focused on the technology, and I think it's going to keep failing us if we're only solving for A while completely ignoring B. And you said something that, again, has been another one of my soapboxes recently, which is the fact that so many organizations, and right, this is why a lot of these things are failing, is because their solution to the people piece is upskilling, reskilling, so that they can maximize AI, reap like maximum ROI from whatever enterprise tool we're putting into the system. And this is where I just want to shake almost every company out there, because it is not about that. You have to get your mindset aligned with where these things are moving first. And the needle isn't moving, which is why, going back to the Matt Schumer piece, it evokes a lot of fear in people because we haven't thought through anything in the middle yet. It's all or nothing with a lot of these tools.
And and a couple of things. I agree with everything you said in principle. I think that there's no way that any normal, rational human would disagree with the ethic of that.
I know, it's just in practice.
I think it's Pollyanna in a way, and I'll tell you why. Because I always go back to the fundamental question, and this doesn't necessarily apply to individual people who are entrepreneurs or have very small family businesses, but any mid to large business, with a few exceptions, who might run very ethical businesses, might really care about their people, might be doing something more philanthropic in nature. You go back to a fundamental question: is the purpose of this business in our capitalist system to make money, to maximize profit, or to employ people? And if the answer is A, and a lot of people out there will be lazy or defensive and they'll say A and B.
No, it's to
It's
make money.
it's to make money. And if you can convince someone that they can make more money, a lot more money, while simultaneously employing fewer people,
Right.
the only downside to that for most business leaders is what still to this day would be a PR nightmare. Oh, why are we going to patronize this company and buy its products when they just laid off 50% of their human workforce? I have news for you. Companies went through this exact thing when it came to the robotics revolution and removing people from the equation when it came to, manufacturing, the factory floor,
Yeah.
et cetera. It is why you have so many towns that are in such bad economic shape when you go through the heartland of this country. There is nothing to say. There's this exceptionalism that people have, that we're in the knowledge economy, or we're senior in a business, that we're not going to be exposed to that. That's an exceptionalism that we have to forget immediately. It can come for you. It very well might come for you. And this is what the Matt Schumer piece did get right, I think. So the question then becomes, let's remove ourselves from the conversation of what most businesses or business leaders or boards who are running businesses, what their priorities are, which is to maximize revenue and profit, and get back to the human piece, which is all of you watching this. If we know that that is likely the case, then long term, my thesis on this is that all of this is going to cause us to have to really reflect on a mass mutation of the economy. Like, the economy is going to have to go through a massive overhaul, one that long term could be amazing. It could be that Star Trek vision of a future where work becomes less necessary and people pursue their purpose and passion in a freer way. I love that idea, and I think we could eventually get there. But between
It's like
point
Elon
A,
Musk recently saying, "Don't even save for retirement, right? It's going to be post-scarcity. Don't bother."
he might be
saving."
right. He might be right. I hope he's right. I hope that's
Just
the case.
divide up your billions.
Well, because the sort of parallel here is that people are saying that AI is going to rapidly bring about an economy of abundance, a world of abundance. Abundance is great, but here's the thing: if most people are not generating income,
Right.
and most people can no longer consume products and services because they don't have income to do so, then we have to radically revolutionize our economic system. That's not going to happen instantly. It's not going to, I've said this in another episode, it's not going to happen in 10 or 20 years.
Yeah.
That's long tail. I think eventually this could be the first step as we go through like a birth canal here with this technology, where eventually we could have a utopian future. But that could be 100 years from now. And what I'm scared
I was
of...
going to say, I don't think it's going to happen in our
No,
lifetime.
what I'm scared of is that point between where we are today as point A and where we could get in a perfect world at point B, and the pain that's going to happen in between. I'm scared of what it means for you and I at our age. I'm scared of what the possible ramifications could be for our son, even though my hope is that in a generation or two, maybe he'll start to see this kind of utopian society unfold. But until we get there, listen, basically what's happening is that we're being put on this treadmill. And you were talking before about the fact that you've read statistics. I've read similar ones. I mean, depending on the source, 96%, 75%, 80% of enterprise AI solutions are failing fully or in part. And there are a few reasons for that. Number one, they're failing because there was no real strategy in place for why we're doing it. They just were like, you know what? We're in an AI revolution. We have to start using AI tools.
And we can't say that we are operating in today's environment without having that solution, right? It's now the new competitive
You have
advantage.
to. It's like a baseline.
Yes.
It's like basic condition for competition is we are utilizing AI tools, AI-powered tools, AI-driven, AI-fueled. So they're
I was
utilizing...
even on a call yesterday, and the company I was speaking to, they're like, "Oh, no, but we have an AI solution. Like, our people in the audience, they're going to have, like, they know
yeah.
AI." And it was like almost a defensiveness where it's like, "Oh no, we know,
Oh, yeah.
we have a product."
Everyone says they do it. It's like the joke when I would tell people that, way before this AI revolution, maybe 10 years ago, I was on a stage at an innovation conference, and I gave my spiel, and there were other people giving innovation talks. And one of the speakers was up there and was like, show of hands, probably 1,000 people in the room. Show of hands, how many of you think that you personally and or your companies that you're working for are truly innovative? And all 1,000 people raised their hands. And what that told me was one of two things, and I know which one I believe. A, every one of them and their companies are truly being wildly innovative, and we're in this wildly innovative society. Or B, most people's ideas of innovation are really not, or they're convincing themselves they're being innovative, but they're not really innovating. They're just doing stepwise kind of incremental stuff. Where we're at right now is that people it's the same thing. It's just like throwing innovation around as a term. People are basically saying we're using AI products, we're integrating AI into the business models. largely because if you don't do that, you look like a dinosaur. The problem is that there is, in many cases, no coherent strategy. That's one. Why are we doing this? What is it going to achieve, and what are the outcomes we want? And there's no clearly defined metrics, and there's no pathway to get there, so most of them are failing. Number two is you also are at a rudimentary level of technology. So the fact is, in a couple of years, some of these products that are being used, they might have advanced to be wildly effective. But right now, they may not quite be able to deliver on that promise. And number three is the fact that you described, this is so important, they haven't thought about the intersection piece between these technologies and the people that are actually going to be using them or deploying them. And here's why that's important. There's such a big business to be had right now. And taking that fear that I was talking about with these gurus and thought leaders about like, you're going to be irrelevant if you don't catch up in the next 3 months, but apply that at the enterprise level. There are people who have been good at their job, in some cases for 20 or 30 years, who are anxious, they're afraid, they're confused. They may not want to admit it to their bosses or to their colleagues, but they're sitting there and they're like, I don't know what to do with this, or this hasn't been well communicated to me. And when you have a gulf like that between technology and people in a workplace, it's going to fail.
So this is the productivity paradox. And this is why almost every individual in some way, shape, or form, and not everybody, but a lot of people are on this treadmill.
Yes.
Because going back to that early part of our conversation about cognitive load, burnout, and fatigue, the promise was that AI was going to free up, let's say, 30% of your work, and then that other 70% could then be distributed across your week, across your days, but it would free up a lot of your time. It's why a lot of people have thrown out the 4-day work week. What we've seen happen is that those boundaries then begin to blur even more between what the workday even is. More people are working at night, on weekends.
Yep.
It's like, wait, what happened to all of this time that I was supposed to have? And again, we haven't rethought what productivity means. People then are so conditioned. It's like we need to then undo a lot of our mental programming. This is why it gets back to organizational culture. You have to fix the culture piece alongside the technology piece. When the internal culture is also telling you, well, you do have some extra time, so you might want to take on this project.
Yep.
You know, you freed up a few hours in your day, that's great, but can you fill it helping a colleague problem solve around this? You know what? Yeah, you want to take Friday off, but next Friday I'm going to need you here so that you can also work with your team to interpret some of the AI output. And we need to have a conversation about what this is going to mean. And then all of a sudden you're like, wait, but that 70 has now gone to 100, and now that 100 is being stretched to 120%. And wait, WTF moment, I'm doing even more work now in parts of my job that I don't even want to effing do.
That's the paradox here. The paradox, the message being received, is that now that these tools are here and they theoretically make you more efficient or take away some of the stuff that you don't need to be doing anymore or that you don't want to be doing, that now you have more time to do additional things or work even harder and faster and hustle more at those things that are still left on your plate. And even if that's not being expressly communicated by your bosses, that's pressure being felt by individual people because they're like, if I don't make up for these deficits in other ways, I'm going to be let go. It may not be tomorrow. It may be in 5 years. And look, I know there are people out there who might be watching this and in our ecosystem who think they're impenetrable to these forces, that this will not impact them because they're so good at what they do. I hope you're right. I don't want this to be a seismic shock to everyone, but the fact is we have to assume that Schumer's thesis is at least 60, 70, 80% there. And if it is, look out. Now, you take it out of the corporate realm. What happens when people who are self-employed, or increasingly people who are self-employed out of necessity because they do become redundant at larger businesses, are also being sold on, now the only way to stay competitive is to basically highly leverage AI. When you go from a smaller pool of people who are running their own businesses to a much larger group of people running their own businesses who are competing in smaller spaces, because a lot of these other functions, a lot of designers and marketers and consultants, their jobs are disappearing right now because AI can do it better. So you have fewer spaces to compete in as an entrepreneur. And as a new entrepreneur, you don't have a moat carved out for yourself. So all of a sudden, you have to learn how to market yourselves. 80 to 90% of people do not know how to sell or do not know how to market themselves because they've had the comfort of a larger company. Now you have to sell and market yourself. You have no base of benefits or income, and you're expected all of a sudden to be fully competitive in this ecosystem. I really think that the treadmill is the best way to visualize this. There are a couple of settings that can change on a treadmill. How long are you going to stay on the treadmill? What speed are you going to put it at? And are you going to set it to an incline, make it a little bit harder? Let's forget the incline for a second. When we just think about the duration of time we're on the treadmill and the speed of that treadmill, we're being sold fear that we're no longer going to be able to get on the treadmill. But if we learn these tools, we'll initially have to get on the treadmill at a pretty high speed. And then over the course of time, we'll be able to get off the treadmill for periods of time. We can slow the speed down, that our pace can be more leisurely. My argument here is that you are being conditioned, whether you realize it or not, to get on a treadmill at a high speed right now. And that there is no guarantee that that speed will ever go down and that you're ever going to be able to get off, at least not in the indeterminate future. You just described it. You said that as some of these things are being taken off of people's plates, there is this pressure, whether it's direct or implied, that they have to be accessible at nights and on weekends, or they feel like they have to make up for their deficits. That means they can't get off the treadmill at a high speed after 5 minutes. They have to stay on the treadmill for much longer periods of time. Even if we can drop the speed a little bit, people are going to feel like if I drop the speed, I'm not being as productive as I should be, so I need to increase the speed again. And by the way, the idea that part of the initial ramp up is that you're going to learn all these tools. You're going to micro learn. You're going to get up to speed. You're going to be great. And I don't necessarily buy that premise because of how quickly these tools are evolving and how quickly new ones are being introduced. Right. You can't just stop the clock now and say, if you learn these tools, you're great. You're going to have to constantly refresh and upskill, which means that treadmill is going to be set to 8 or 10 for the indeterminate future. And oh, by the way, one other reason, I didn't mention this before, I failed to do this. One of the reasons I don't buy the premise that if you don't catch up in the next 3 months, you're going to be left behind, is because what that means is that you're saying that anyone who's of an older demographic who tend to adopt technological tools a little bit more slowly, that they're all going to immediately be rendered obsolete. That is a very dark scenario for the future of our economy and for multiple generations of people. That if they can't get on this technological highway right now, that they're not going to be able to compete in any way in the knowledge economy. It also suggests that kids, like our son, who is of an age right now where he's not using a lot, if any, AI tools, will not be well served figuring this out when he's 15, 16, 18, or 21 years old. I would argue that he's going to be just fine. When he's of age to have to use these tools, either in school or when he ends up being, an entrepreneur or joining a business, I would argue that he's going to have the wherewithal to be able to adopt those tools when he needs to at that moment in time. I don't think if he doesn't figure it out in the next 3 months, he's going to be left behind in a future economy. So please be wary when people are selling you hope, preying on your fear. I understand that a lot of what we're talking about here might seem like we are, in our way, like fear-mongering. We're not. We're trying to be realists, and we're also trying to measure and hedge it.
It gets back to really approaching a lot of these big topics through the lens of common sense, knowing that AI is not a panacea, but also being very realistic about what it both can do and what it cannot do. I think there's also, just to continue to wrap a bow around this, another piece of it that's very interesting, and that is the fact that one of the co-founders of Anthropic recently said something that we have been echoing for so long, which is, right, in a time of AI, and this is someone who has introduced Claude to the world, right, to really lean into what makes you human. So these founders know it, even if it's not explicitly stated, and that also went viral. It was like, oh my God, she said, like, we need to study the humanities and, really lean into team human. And the more that we can approach our children that way, really keep driving home that message of agency over our own thinking, even do some exercises at home to just be like, what is it that AI can't do? If you get off of that treadmill, just think, how can I think about this differently through the lens of being human?
And I agree. I think leaning into those human factors, agency is a word you bring up a lot. I love it. I think it's one of the core components of a lot of our thinking. Identity, curiosity. I think a lot of these things, they sound softer, but ultimately they get at the essence of, I think, what differentiates us. There's no doubt that in the future, we're going to be heavily reliant on these tools. And I hear people sometimes say, when they try to play down the fear mongering, they're like, this is just a newly evolved, the next set of really, really amazing tools. And they kind of liken it to the computing and the internet revolution and office suite of products revolution, where all of these things took away administrative tasks. Those were tools. And those are tools that many people still use. If artificial intelligence lives up to its promise, and it is truly intelligent or replicates some level of human intelligence, then the design really is about trying to enhance, augment, or replace people. That's it. It's not just a suite of software tools. So if we understand that this is not just the next step of a progression, a stepwise progression, this is an evolution. This is an evolution. So we cannot use the benchmarks from those past technological revolutions to explain where we are today. Our goal here, as Erica said, is to help all of you navigate this. Our goal is to give you some common sense and hopefully just better prepare you. I think if we start asking the right questions of why and who some of these takes are coming from, evaluate them critically, and then figure out, what do they really mean for us? How do we want to apply these things meaningfully in our job? And some of you seeing this may say, you might be in a trade. You might be in a profession where you're like, this won't necessarily impact me immediately. It may not. But for all of you to think about this, whether it's for yourselves or for your kids, it's going to matter. Our son is 8 years old. Okay, he's not using these tools right now. I don't think he's going to be left behind in a future economy. I think we just have to have different conversations with him as he comes of age. So I think this is such an important topic. I love talking through these things with you. It's like, how can we do this justice in this amount of time? We can't. So 3 key takeaways from today's episode. Number 1, always evaluate the who, or the source of information about a topic like AI. Does someone stand to benefit from being bullish or bearish about this? Learn to critically evaluate that.
Number 2 is that AI was always sold to us as a productivity tool and a time saver. Do an internal audit to say, is this saving me time, or is it actually creating more work in the process?
And number 3, as you do that internal audit, think about your perfect sort of scenario for the future. If you get on this treadmill, how long do you want to be on it? What speed do you want to be at? And then reverse engineer from there how you have to use this technology potentially to help get you there.
So thank you for joining today's episode. Another episode will be launching next Tuesday. And as always, remember to like, follow, and subscribe for more. If you enjoyed today's conversation, like, follow, and subscribe to stay ahead of what's next. I'm Erica Orange.
And I'm Jared Weiner. Thanks for waking the future with us. We'll see you next time.